In this video, I want to talk about some modern day examples of natural selection. First one I want to talk about is called the peppered moth, because it looks like pepper. That was one of the first studies to collect evidence for natural selection. Okay, and it was conducted last century in England by a bloke called Henry Kettlewell. Okay, the first study, one of the first studies to be made for natural selection, and one of the first studies to collect evidence for natural selection. Okay, and he studied the peppered moth, okay, which existed in two forms. You've got a normal color, which is white with black speckles, okay, white little dots, and you've got all black moths, peppered moths. Now, these are found in the cities, okay? At the time, he stumbled across this fact, so he found that they were found in cities. The ones that were found in cities were almost all black, okay? And the ones in rural areas, almost all white. And he concluded that this difference was due to selective agents acting on the populations, okay? So concluded that selective agents acted on these populations. Okay, so most likely from predators. Okay, birds actually preying on the moths. So birds. Now, in the cities, all the buildings and trees were blackened by soot, okay, left from the Industrial Revolution from 150 years. Okay, so any white moths, so let's say this is a tree trunk that's black, any white ones, you could see, right? White stands out from black. And so any white moths resting on these trees could be seen more easily by predators, and so the bird would come along and kill it in the city. So that's why there was only black in the cities. And similarly, the black moths would produce black offspring. Oh, sorry. In rural areas, the white moths were harder to see because they were, the trees were cleaner, and the buildings were cleaner. You couldn't really make out where they were. And so hence white moths were easy to see, and the black ones were seen by birds easily, and they died. And he basically carried out experiments where he placed the two different colors on tree trunks, on a tree trunk, and he observed, okay, which he observed birds feeding on them, okay, and he wanted to see how many died and how many survived. Now, the results were that the birds ate mostly the dark moths on light-colored tree trunks, as I mentioned, yeah? And vice versa. So I'll show you the results of this experiment. So dark tree trunks and light tree trunks. Okay, the percentage of dark eaten, the percentage of light eaten. Okay, here's what he found. He found that 26% of the dark were eaten on the dark trees, okay? But 74% of the light were eaten on the dark trees, which makes sense, okay? On the light tree trunks, 86% of the dark ones were eaten, which makes sense, but only 14% of the light were eaten, okay? Now, natural selection highlights how much the environment affects living organisms, as I mentioned, okay, by causing the characteristics of a species to change over many generations. So that's why a lot of these a lot of the ones in the city, the light ones were wiped out, and the dark ones in the country were wiped out. Okay, so that's the first modern day example. Let me talk about another modern day example. Mosquitoes and DDT. Now, DDT, ready for this, is diphenyl trichloroethane. It's a colorless, tasteless chemical compound originally used in making insecticides. Okay, you don't have to know what this stands for. Okay, it's basically an insecticide used by farmers to protect crops from insects. Now, mosquitoes, which which carry the diseases yellow fever and malaria were treated with chemical pesticides, right? So mosquitoes which carry diseases yellow fever and malaria were treated with chemical pesticides. Okay, and by natural selection, the population of mosquitoes with a natural resistance to the pesticides was developed over the last 20 years. Okay, following the introduction of pesticides. So pesticides were introduced, mosquitoes became resistant. They developed an immunity to the pesticides. Okay, and similarly, algae, bacteria nowadays can be resistant to certain types of antibiotics. Okay, that's mosquitoes and DDT. The third and final example is that of bacteria and antibiotics. Okay, now the Scottish scientist in 1928, Alexander Fleming, okay, he found a way to kill bacteria. How did he do this? He discovered that some fungi make special compounds to defend themselves against bacteria. Okay, and he was the first one to isolate penicillin in a petri dish. And several types of antibiotics have lost their effectiveness, as we know nowadays, against many different bacteria, because the bacteria have become resistant to them. The bacteria have become resistant to antibiotics. Yes, penicillin is a form of antibiotics. It's common in your antibiotics that you take. Now, by natural selection, in the millions of bacterial cells that infect a person, right, some may have inherited cell chromosomes that can destroy antibiotic molecules, or they can resist it in another way. Now, any resistant bacteria may reproduce, okay, survive, and they can form resistant offspring. So any resistant bacteria can survive, reproduce, survive and reproduce to create resistant offspring. Okay, now, bacteria, as you know, reproduce by dividing in half. They produce two copies of themselves, and eventually they'll become resistant enough to make you ill. So you therefore need different types of antibiotics. And one very dangerous type of bacteria is called golden staph. Okay, this is resistant to many types of antibiotics. It's very dangerous. And as you know as well, constant antibiotic use in hospitals, not only hospitals but in households, have kept making resistant bacteria survive. Okay, eventually the species become resistant.